Africa never had a name as a continent, as a whole continent. This continentalism and Pan-Africanism, which then attempt to impose one particular name, as if the 3,000 tribes of Africa, the 54 countries in Africa, were calling this continent with that name. It's a 20th and 21st century creation of black scholars. And some they go to that extent of breaking it down, Afuraka, but Africa comes from Scipio Africanus. So it's a name imposed by the Romans. Now this is another problem of our scholars when they are desperately attempting to Africanize things that are not necessarily African. So there are others who break it down and say Af means the mouth, Ra is the light, Ka, this is the mouth of the light of, they come up with all sorts of things. But Africa, the continent, we never had a one singular name for this continent, number one. Number two, you have other names like Al-Kebulan that our learned brothers and sisters are busy throwing around as Al-Kebulan. It's not African, it's Arab. Al-Kebulan. Once it says Al, it's Arabic, it's not African. So they sound nice to the woke and the conscious that this is Al-Kebulan, it's like they know something, but really they did not even make a research on that name. The same as people who call in South Africa Azania. And you ask them, which tribe of the Azanians are South Africans? Which language is Azania come from? Is it Pedi? Is it Xhosa? Is it Zulu? Is it Sotho? Is it Ndebele? Of course it is not. It's Arabic. It means Azanj, the land of the slaves. So it's coming from Swahili coast. The Arabs used to refer to the Swahili coast between Sofala and Kilwa. They used to refer to that place as Azania, which means the land of the slaves, because that is where the Arabs were taking their slaves. So like today, people like the African Union make the same mistake and say Swahili is an African language. But Swahili is 50% African, 50% Arabic. It is not 100% Bantu, it's not 100% African. Swahili comes from the word Swahil, which means the language of the coast. It's a lingua franca. It was a language of trade between the Arabs and the Africans. It is like a Fanaga law that was used in the mines during the apartheid time. So the language that they used to communicate among them. So it was a language of trade. So that is why Swahili have names like Thursday is Al-Hamis, which is Arabic Al-Hamis. Law in Swahili is Sharia. A whole lot of Swahili words are themselves Arabic word because of that cultural crossbreeding that was taking place between the slave and the slave master, the slave trader and the slave catchers, the tradings and so forth that was taking place in those Swahili coast. So because of laziness to do research, then they go and pick up Swahili and said, oh, it's African language because about 6-7 countries in Africa are speaking it, particularly in the east of Africa, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Congo. You have people who speak in Swahili, and I speak Swahili among the 14 languages that I speak. I speak Swahili too. But it is not African, in spite of the fact that it is widely spoken in Africa. Otherwise, if we are going to select a language on the basis of its widely spokenness, then English will be African. French will be African, because you have like 27 African countries that speak French, the Francophone countries, or 27 or 23. So now the excuse that is given to us that Swahili, it is widely spoken, so therefore it's African. We just need to invent a new name, a new language that we will speak all of us, which is difficult to invent a new language. We, as much as they are trying to invent one name for this continent and say it was Africa. It was not Africa. The Greeks call it Ethiopia, the land of the sunbend. So the Greek knowledge of the continent, as far as they know this continent, they call it Ethiopia. The Romans, they call it Africa. The Arabs, they call it Al-Kebulan. So different people call it different names. So even ourselves, we had a different names, but not of the entire continent, because that require continental consciousness and that require continentalism. So in the past, there was nothing that brought about that continental consciousness. So here, when we talk of African spirituality, we're talking about a spiritual expression that is common to all of us. Not that was created by having an all Africa conference and we come together and say we are going to make a spirituality and call it African. No, it is African spirituality because it is common to all of us, and when we migrated throughout the continent, we carry it with us, and then its expression is found everywhere. But it's not something out of the continental general consensus that we come together and we say we are going to call this continent Africa. So now some scholars of Egyptology, which gave birth to chematology, because it was Egyptology that gave birth to chematology, and in the process now they come up with these ideas. Like if you study the works of Dr. Matole Motshekga of the Kara Institute, they do a whole lot of that. Afuraka, breaking up things, Mary, Maria, what. So they're grabbing on straws. They're trying their level best to Africanize certain non-African concepts and make them acceptable. So it is not really serving the purpose of decolonization to the fullness. It's rather trying to, to make exigencies and comparison and things that are somehow similar but not the same, and things that are by accident you just put up these words. Is a new construction. It's a 20th century construction. So which now our woke and conscious and chematologists are coming up with this thing, like the making of Osiris into a Christ, or Horus into a son of God, and Osiris as Jehovah, and then Isis into Mary. It's all that. It's the result of searching for the Christian God in Africa, searching for European concepts in Africa, using European concepts to define African phenomena.